Okay, so today we are having a look at the Salty Simulations mod for the Boeing 747-800 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this is a simple mod you can download from FlightSim.2 that improves both the avionics, the flight management systems, and the flight model of the 747. So we're going to do a short flight up the eastern coast of the US. If we go and have a look at little nav map, we've got the flight charted out. So we are at Atlantic City. We're going to fly along the coast and then come into LaGuardia. But we're going to do what's called the Expressway Approach into LaGuardia, where you turn right at Dials and you fly along the expressway. You pass around the back of the fountain and the stadium, and you go into runway 31 at LaGuardia. So it's a bit hair-raising, but it'll be a good check to see, how the flight model is on the 747, to see, can we keep control of the aeroplane while doing this kind of quite extreme approach. Okay, so before we begin, let's go and have a look and see how much fuel we've got in the aeroplane, because we're not going to need very much. So we're going to cut it right back. Okay, so we're going to have the wings half full, no centre tank fuel at all. Okay, let's go and get in the aeroplane. So this is it will look very, very similar to the 747, the normal Asobo one. But other than that, it really isn't. So standby power, we are going to turn to auto. APU, we are going to start, and then it flicks back to on all on its own. If we have external power available, we can click on avail on each side, and then we can go APU gen. Oh, we're waiting for the APU now, sorry. This was come up saying avail on the APU gen buttons when the APU has started, so we just wait a few moments for that to happen. If we have a look around the cockpit, if we press Ctrl and 8 on the keyboard, that gives us an overview of the entire overhead panel. So what we're actually looking at here is this panel up here. So if we press Ctrl and 8, we get a view just of this panel, which is really handy. We can turn the batteries on as well while we're at it. We can also turn the inertial navigation system to align. And we're just waiting for the APU to come up to say avail, and then we can turn on the APU generators. Unlike the 737, the 747 has automatic crossfeed control, so you don't have to crossfeed things yourself. So we're still waiting, aren't we, for APU gen to appear. Just out of interest, let's turn external power off. I'm just trying to see how much this is going to behave. Let's try that again. Maybe the APU didn't start for some reason. Finally! I was starting to wonder then if it was going to wake up at all. So it's registered that key press from earlier on APU gen, so there's a bit of a realism issue there, but that's a minor thing really. Okay, so it just took the APU a little while to fire up. I think the first time it didn't happen for whatever reason. Okay, so we now have power going to things. So the next thing we need to do is go and switch on the fuel pumps. And we are not going to switch on the centre ones. We are going to go and switch on the window heats though, because if we noticed down here there was a warning about the heats. So it's saying the parking brake is set, so anything you see in white is not dangerous, it's just letting you know as a reminder that the APU is running, the parking brake's set, and IRS is in alignment mode. That's why we can't see anything on here at the moment. But that's fine. So we get rid of the yoke. If we press Control 2, that shows us the MCP, the Master Control Panel for the autopilot. For takeoff, we'll wait and configure this last. So Control 3 shows us the engineering display. Control 4 shows us the flight management computers and the display here. Okay, so I'm just going to move that stick out of the way for our purposes today. So when you come into the FMC, the flight management computer on the Salty Mod 747, you will immediately see that it's very different. Now there is a Salty menu, and in here you can see things like how quick the IRS alignment is. So you can see it's aligning at the moment. So we'll leave it aligning and we'll go and get on with programming. You can also see the SimBrief is available in here to do integration. I'm not going to use that today. I'm going to show you how you can program a flight yourself on the FMC and the Boeing. So we go into the FMC. So this is suddenly the actual, the same system we get in the real aeroplane. So we go to position initialization first, and we put in our reference airport. So if we go and look in little nav map, it's the ICAO code for the airport, which is KACY. So KACY. So it's worth pointing out, actually, if you're going to be looking at getting the PMDG 737 when it comes out, if you've not used a Boeing plane in anywhere near a study level simulator before, this will act as a good kind of launch pad. It will get you familiar, because the Boeings do have very similar flight management computers. So we're going to pick up the GPS position and drop it into there just to confirm it, and then we go to the route page. So in common with lots of other flight management computers and MCDUs on the Airbuses, the next page to go to is usually at the bottom right. One thing that's different to the 737, and I don't know if this is an inaccuracy or not, normally where we put our reference airfield in, it would be carried over in the scratch pad automatically in a Boeing. So when you get to the setting up your route, it's already keyed. So KACY. KACY. But again, I don't know if that's an inaccuracy or not. And where are we going to? KLGA, which is LaGuardia. KLGA. So I've typed something wrong, so I should be able to delete what I've typed. Clear, there we go. So it's KLGA. KLGA for LaGuardia. Okay, and then we can go to performance initialization. What height are we going to get at or get up to? So let's go and have a look at a little nav map. So we're just making this up as we go. This will correct itself in a moment. We're going to go IFR. We're going to go, let's try 10,000 feet, see if we can get to 10,000 feet. Yeah, that should be fine actually. So let's go for, now we should be able to go type in 100 and it will know what we mean. Yes, flight level 100 is 10,000 feet. Cost index, we're going to put in 199. So we're not going to worry about fuel usage at all. Reserves, £3,000. We don't have to do anything else here. So thrust limits, we don't have to do anything else here. Takeoff, so this is our takeoff parameters. We're going to have 10 degrees of flaps. So in common with lots of other planes, if you see square boxes, that's the mandatory field. If you see hyphens, they are not mandatory, but it's useful to have these for the runway. So the V speed and the V rotate and V2 are to do with your kind of your decision points along the runway. I'm not going to get into it in this video. So you can calculate these automatically. It's kind of built into the FMC to do it. So as soon as you've put the flaps in, and as soon as it knows, kind of the weight, it's got the weight already. It's got the flaps, therefore it can work out the rotate speeds for you. So thrust, yeah. So we've done everything there. Next, we're going to go into departure arrivals. So there's a depart button down here. So you can see it's gone straight to the departure screen. If we go to index, we see departure and arrival, but because we haven't done either yet, when we click on departure arrival button, it comes in and shows us departures immediately. Excuse me. So we are going to be using a runway 13 out of Laguardia. So we select runway 13 and we can execute that straight away and go back in to the index, and then we go to the KLGA arrival, sorry. Now we're not going to put anything in because we're using the expressway. So we're going to leave that completely as it is. So then we go into the route page. Sorry, not the route page, the legs page. We can see what's been put in so far. So all we know so far is we are leaving on runway 13 and we're going to end up at KLGA. So in between there's a whole stack of waypoints I would like to put in. So STEVV, STEVV. So the way you insert waypoints on the Boeing is similar to other planes, where you select the first waypoint you want to push down and it inserts it in between. So we've done that. There's obviously two of these. They are both at the same location, so it doesn't matter. So STEVV, Briggs, B-R-I-G-S, B-R-I-G-S. So again, we put that on top of the waypoint we want to push along. And there it goes. K-A-R-R-S, K-A-R-R-S. And again, push the waypoints along. WooDab. WooDab. And there's two of them, but they are the same. So we select. Now you can see now we haven't got a way of pushing this down anymore because it's gone off the end of the list. So we go next page. So then we're working on page 2 the whole time. So we've done WooDab, MyRCA, MyRCA. Select KLGA and it pushes it down, inserts MyRCA. Nancy, N-A-N-C-I. Apple. So again, this is an important one for us because this is where we get onto the line to prepare for the approach. So Apple, it doesn't know, there's lots of them. So show information, we want the one at 40 degrees 33. So it is the top one. So these are probably in distance order. So we've got Apple listed. Next is dials. Dials corresponds with the place where we turn off of the normal route in and turn for the expressway. KEYTH. So these are just purely for reference purposes. KEYTH. When we're actually flying it, we won't be looking at these waypoints. We'll be looking out of the window at features on the ground. And BEHRR is our final waypoint. So next page. What was it again? BEHRR. BEHRR. That goes in front of there. Okay, so that's done. We execute that. And we should have, when we look on the screen now, a route, which we have got. If we zoom out on the primary flight display, there we go. So we're just going to take off straight out and fly the route. So now we can go and do a few extra things around the cockpit. So we're just going to go and have a look around. So we need to be able to start the engines up, we're going to need to have the APU bleed on, sorry, and it is on. We haven't opened the bleeds for the engines yet, so we've just done that. Other than that, we want to have some beacon lights on, nav lights on, strobe on. We don't need the wing and the logo. And we're ready to start the engines. Now this is a little bit inaccurate. Normally you would start from the right hand side and start the engines across. So what we're going to do is start them all at once, but we'll at least do the pushback first. And before I do that, I need to make sure my controls are configured for the Boeing. So this has got 4 engines, remember. So what I'm going to do, I've got 2 throttle sticks on my controls. I'm going to configure it so the left 2 engines are on one stick and the right 2 engines are on the other stick. getting there slowly. Just going through the profiles that I've got saved for various different aircraft. There we go, the 4-engine profile. Apply, go back, resume. So we can see this happen now. If we look down here, if I push my left stick, the 2 left throttles go. Also I've got locks on the throttles, which establishes where the 0 point is. So you can see as I hit the ends, it's just before the reversers kick in. So if I push my left stick forwards, the left 2 engines go, and if I push the right stick forward, the right 2 engines go. Okay, so what do we do to start the engines on this thing? Well, before we do that, let's get a pushback happening, because pushback's going to take a while. So I've got a little add-on for Flight Sim called Flight Sim Pushback, and we can do a manual pushback, or we can pre-plan. So if we pre-plan the pushback, what happens is we see an overhead view of the aircraft. Give it a few moments. And we can say, okay, we want to be pushed back to there, please, or to there. Okay. And press enter, and that has planned our pushback. Now we can request the pushback.
Cockpit to ground. This is ground. Stand by.
So you can see the truck is pulling in. Remember I pushed the lever out of the way of the FMC for the brakes? Look, the air brakes have come up, so I'm going to put them back down.
Okay, sir. The bypass pin is installed. All doors and hatches closed and all ground equipment is removed. The parking brakes are set. You may lift. Parking brake set. Lifting the aircraft.
So you will now see the nose come up. So this is the tug lifting the airplane off the floor so it can push it around.
We are cleared for start and push. Okay, cleared for push start. Please release parking brake.
So I release the parking brake.
Parking brakes are released.
And he will now follow the planned route.
The engines in sequence. It will start in the sequence.
Okay, so he's pushing back, and you will see he'll start to steer, and he's doing it now, look. So while he's doing that, we can actually go and start the engines. Now I'm going to cheat slightly, because it takes a while to start all 4. So I'm going to start all 4 at once, and this is an inaccuracy in the sim. You wouldn't do this in the real world. But you can see I will be able to get away with it, and you'll see the numbers coming up. So if we go and look outside, you can see all 4 engines are spinning up. Normally you would start at one side. You usually start with this engine and then work your way across. The reason for starting with a particular engine is on most, or certainly on the Boeings and most other kinds of aircraft, the hydraulics, I'm just doing my parking brake.
Parking brake set.
Yeah, the hydraulics are powered by one particular engine for the initial powering up of or the pressurization of the hydraulics.
Ground. Startup is complete. You may disconnect. Roger. Good engine start. Clear to disconnect. See you at the side. Have a good flight. Holding position waiting for the visual. Thank you and goodbye.
Okay, so while we're waiting for him to get out of the way, we're just going to go and have a look around. The lights are operating. It's difficult to see in bright sunshine, but they are. Okay, let's go and have a look then at where we need to taxi to. So we come out of here, left, and then all the way down to the beginning of runway 13. So we're going out of there and left. Okay, we can also move the flaps to 10 degrees already, so I've just moved the flap lever and you can see marker is down here telling you where they are travelling to. On a 747, you might already know this, it's quite a complex arrangement and the flaps take a while to move. You can see them all moving gently. So the wing is changing shape. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to happen, we can start taxiing. Oh, the other thing we'll need to do is go and calibrate the barometric pressure that the altimeter uses. So normally you would ask the tower for that and they would tell you and then you would configure it. We're not doing that. So there we go. So we can get rid of that window now because we've done the pushback. We can ease the throttles forwards. And we're rolling. So now the aircraft is powered up and the engines are running and we're taxiing out to the runway. We've got some time to do the FMC while we're on the way. Sorry, not the FMC, the MCP, the Master Control Panel for the autopilot. So we're going to turn on the flight directors, which gives us the magenta lines. I've talked about this before in previous videos. There's two parts to a modern autopilot. There's the flight director, which figures out what it needs to do to follow the flight plan, and then there's the autopilot that just follows what the flight director tells it to do. So when we climb out, we're going to 10,000 feet, so that's already correct. We can do a flight level change to get there, and we can arm an auto throttle, so we can go to speed mode. We can't do it yet, but we're going to set the climb out for 220 knots. Now let's just check where we turn off here. So it is this next turn. So it's a bit of a sharp turn for a 747 to be making. It should be alright. So the sim was going to pause on us then. Unfortunately the tablet doesn't work in this 747. It's not that clever yet. So we know we're taking off runway 13, so we can preset as a backup to nav mode or LNAV mode. We can preset the heading to 130 degrees. So let's go and ease the throttles forwards to expedite our trip along the taxiway. Okay, so something else to think about is, yes, you've got LNAV and VNAV. We're not going to use VNAV because it isn't programmed correctly into the aircraft yet. LNAV stands for lateral navigation, and it basically means the autopilot is going to take charge of keeping us pointing in the right direction in the sky, but it's not going to look after our vertical position or, you know, our altitude. So we will use flight level change mode to do that, and we'll also, or we could use vertical speed. To be honest, in the 747, because you've got an auto throttle, you can use vertical speed mode just as easily as a flight level change. So just to show this being done, we can go in and do it. So we'll say we want to climb out at 2,500 feet a minute. To be honest, we've got so little fuel, we could easily get away with 3,000 feet a minute. So look outside. 747 in flight sim is a monster. It's just awesome. Oh, I'm almost on the grass yet while I'm busy talking to you. Let's go and get back in the centre of the taxiway. So we are taxiing all the way to the end of the runway. We're going to use all of it. That's the one thing about the 747, is you need a lot of runway typically. Landing isn't so bad because it's got very high lift wings. It's just the thrust to weight ratio with a plane this heavy takes a bit of a run to accelerate. Or if you want to accelerate smoothly, you could of course hold it on the brakes and open the engines up, but it's not exactly advisable. Okay, so we're just pulling around onto runway 13. We've got no ATC, so nobody's going to tell us to do or not do anything, which is all fine. So one of the things the Salty mod has done is reprogram a lot of these screens so they look correct, and a lot of those pages you saw in the flight management computer have been rewritten so they more correctly illustrate the way the real Boeing FMC works as against the simplified version that a Sobo ship with the simulator. Again, the Salty mod is free. You can find it on flightsim.2. Okay, so a few things are going to happen in a hurry once we come off the ground. So let's just straighten up before we accelerate. So we are going to accelerate, then we are going to rotate, and we are going to activate the autopilot as soon as we got the aeroplane climbing in a stable manner. You can see if we pull in on the range here, at about 10 miles out we're going to get to Stev, sorry, and turn left. We're going to climb for 10,000 feet at 3,000 feet a minute. We are going to use LNAV mode, so I'll just switch that on. So LNAV will take care of us staying on the flight plan line. The vertical speed and the target altitude will take care of our height. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to ease the throttles forwards. Let's see what the volume's looking like for you. That's fine, isn't it? You can hear it over me. Or hear me over it, I should say. So let's just get straight on the runway. The only problem with the 747, it's got such a huge tail, it does weathercock a certain amount. So we've just gone through V-rotate, so nose up. It's a big lumbering lump. So there we go, we're off the ground. I just realised the control for the undercarriage was reversed and it didn't show me that. We haven't turned the APU off either. Turn that off now. Remember, cross-feeding is automatic. So I'm going to engage the autopilot and engage the auto throttle arming. So the auto throttles now, you will see in the Boeing as against the Airbus, the throttles are going to move all on their own. See, that's not me, that's the aircraft doing that. So it's trying to get to the target airspeed. So this is flying on autopilot now. We can increase the speed now up to 250 knots. We can raise the flaps. And we just let the plane get on with it. Now, it's not perfect. It's not as smooth as the real aircraft would be at doing some of these operations, but it's a pretty good approximation. So we'll keep an eye on this. So we're just coming up to 3,500 feet, 250 knots. So remembering, most parts of the world, the 250 knot speed limit is in place until you get to 10,000 feet, and then you switch your barometric pressure to 2992 when you get to 18,000 feet typically, although it can be different depending on the area you're in, and you can look that up or ask air traffic control for it and they'll tell you. Okay, so let's have a look at the FMC then. So we've got our legs page, which is what we'd expect to see. We're heading towards Briggs at the moment, which is the one that's after Stev. So it's actually started turning. Look, it's aiming for the next waypoint already. You've also got a really nice progress page. So if we press prog, that gives you your ETAs. and how much fuel you'll have left. So again, remember I said I'd massively overfueled. This plane can fly thousands of miles and we're asking it to fly 100. So we're just coming up towards 7,500 feet. So there's not much else to say really. This Salty Simulations 747 pretty much does what it says on the tin now. It's much better than it was. They still haven't quite nailed VNAV. So what VNAV would do is, if you've got your heights programmed into the flight plan, the plane will ascend and descend automatically as well. It does have approach mode. I don't think it has auto land. So you do have to come off the autopilot at a few hundred feet and land manually. But as you'll see today, I'm not going to be using that at all. I'm going to fly manually all the way in to Laguardia. That's interesting that that didn't tell me any warnings here that the undercarriage lever was up while we were on the ground, which is something that's perfectly capable of, of happening in the real aircraft. But I suspect the real aircraft would have a warning to say that it didn't agree, what the control throw was. So it's telling me again we've got the seat belts off. We've essentially got an empty cabin, so I'm not really worried about that. And again, the simulator is not going to judge you for having told people to put their seatbelts on or not. Not unless you've got ACARS on, which might pick that up and penalise you for it. So ACARS is a recording system used by lots of the virtual airlines and, well, lots of real airlines. But it records everything you're doing during a flight, and then afterwards you can download it and it can be analysed to see if you followed procedures correctly. Right down to things like switching the beacon lights on and off at the correct stage of taxi out and things like that. It's pretty good. Okay, so we've got a kind of a gentle flight up the coast to happen now, which is going to take a few minutes. So I'm going to pause recording and I'll let you know when we get to about Nancy. Okay, so I'm going to go and pause recording, otherwise this is going to be tremendously boring for you. Okay, you're rejoining me and we are approaching the MYRCA waypoint before we go to Nancy and Apple and Dials. I realised it would be worth you seeing this because we've already got to 10,000 feet and we've accelerated to 340 knots. So we need to manage slowing down now and getting back to the ground. So you can see I'm still on the auto throttle. I'm doing 340 knots, which corresponds. So the first thing we're going to do is slow ourselves down to 250 again before we start descending. Otherwise we find ourselves in the awkward situation of trying to descend and slow down at the same time, which isn't impossible, but it's easier to think of doing one thing at a time. So we've selected 250 knots now as our target airspeed. Now remember, we are at 10,000 feet here. We need to come around this corner. We need to be at 2,500 feet when we get to Dials, and then we'll be descending, or 2,000 feet, and then we'll be descending all the way around that final corner, but we'll be flying that manually. Okay, so the speed is coming down. If you want to expedite the speed change, you could always throw the air brakes out. But again, this is one of the advantages of reducing your speed while you're in level flight, not while you're descending. Otherwise you might have to start playing games with the air brakes. But yeah, like I say, it's not unusual to see the air brakes come out on descent. Okay, we're starting to make the turn towards Nancy. So we need to start descending now. So we're going to set that target altitude over here for 2,500 feet. Oops. So that's 2,500, and we need to tell it a rate to get there. So we'll go vertical speed, and we'll say, now can you see a line has appeared? That's how far down the track we will be going at 1,000 feet a minute to get to 2,500 feet. So that's probably fine. Look, we can come down at 1,000 feet a minute, because by the time we come around this corner it's going to be about there. So we're coming down, we're holding 250 knots. Now it's worth bearing in mind, look, the throttles are almost at the stops, so we couldn't come down much faster than this without accelerating unless we used air brakes. If you think about it, we can tell the aeroplane, oh actually I want to come down at 4,000 feet a minute. So we're coming down at 1,000. You can see it's happening there, look. And at 1,000 feet a minute, with the throttles almost on the stops, it's just about hanging on to 250 knots. So you can see if we went for a steeper descent, it would start accelerating and there's nothing it could do about it, because the autopilot will not throw the air brakes out. So you can actually cause your own problems. So let's see how we're doing in terms of height. So I want to give myself some margin before we get to dials. So I'm going to do exactly what we just talked about. I'm going to tell it to descend a bit more quickly. So you can see this is coming in. And let's see if it can still hold on to 250 knots. Yes, look, it's just accelerating. And the throttles are pretty much on the stops. Doesn't like it, does it? So let's go and give it a little bit of speed brake, and that's just enough to bring it back under control. Look, so we're now making the turn at Nancy towards dials and we're coming down nicely, and we can start slowing down even more. So we're going to go for 220 knots now, and let's see if this can actually slow down enough. See, it's stopped descending, so it's prioritizing changing speed over descending. It will, once it has stopped changing the speed, yeah, the vertical speed is increasing again, look. So that's something else to be aware of, is it will prioritize a speed change on descent over descending. So that's very, if you come hurtling, I see this quite commonly on group flights. People come hurtling into the approach, having been on some kind of bizarre race in their own head throughout the entire flight. And then they find they can't, or they're too high and too fast in the final stages of descent. And it's because they were too fast at the beginning of approach. You know, even sort of 100 miles out, they were too fast. And they just imagined the aeroplane could get them down. And you see it again and again. And they end up kind of 5,000 feet over the airfield and wondering, why did that happen? It's because they didn't prepare enough in advance and they tried to get the aeroplane to do too many things at once. Okay, so let's reduce the range on this screen now. So we're coming in towards dials. We're going to start bringing the flaps in now. So again, now we've got flaps, we won't need the air brakes anymore. So I'm immediately going for 10 degrees flaps. We're going to get the gear down as well. While we're at it, we'll go and turn on the landing lights. And you can see New York City over there. Coming down through 5,000 feet. Now, we are looking for 2 water towers, which are over here. You can see there's our normal approach into the runway there, but we're not going to take that. We're coming in. I'll show you quickly on the map before we get there. The normal approach would take us straight into runway 04, but we're doing the expressway approach. So we're going to turn off at the water towers, go scooting around the back of the city and around the back of the stadium, come in at low over the buildings here, over the water and straight into runway 31. And we're going to do it manually. So we're going to get the aeroplane stable before we get to dials. So we're not coming down fast enough. So I'm coming coming off the autopilot. I've thrown out the air brakes. Okay, we're down to 2,500 feet. So we're also going to come off of the auto throttle now. So it's disarmed. Okay, so we turn right for the expressway. And we can see the expressway. It's over here. It's right in the way of the window pillar. There it is. So we are now descending. We've got an overspeed because I've just thrown the next level of flaps a little bit early. So we're just coming down to 1,200 feet. Now there's a water fountain here. We are going to aim to skim around the back of the water fountain, around the back of the stadium. So about 1,000 feet to go into the turn, which is perfect. So we're just levelling up. There's the water fountain to our bottom left. Now if we look out over here, we should see the runway coming round anytime soon. Here it is. So it's all just about being prepared in advance for this last bit of mayhem. A little bit off to the left, but it's not too bad. It's not my best landing ever, but good enough to show you the principles of this one. It's worth saying I haven't practiced this either. I just went into this cold today, just to show you it. Okay, so we're coming off the runway. That's interesting that they've got a special sound for a heavy landing in the Salty mod, like a crunch, or not a crunch sound, but a the sound of the compression of the undercarriage. So again, at this point you would obviously be stopping and following instruction from the ground at Laguardia. So there you go, that was the expressway. So it's quite good fun. You come in low manually and just judge that. So again, it requires practice, which I didn't do, so I lacked that little bit of a finesse on the last corner, purely because I've only flown the Salty Mod 747 twice before, so I'm still learning, you know, the approach and the way the aircraft behaves on the controls. So it just shows preparation is everything. I didn't have that preparation today. I went into this completely cold. I knew the route in, but I didn't know how the aircraft would behave. And I have to say, the aircraft actually behaved really, really nicely. So the flight model on the Salty mod for the 747 is very, very good. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave the aircraft parked out on the tarmac and get told off probably, and put the wheel brakes on. I'm not going to go and taxi to a gate and mess around doing all of that. This is really to show you, you know, how the aircraft behaves when you're flying it. So there you go, it's the Salty mod. Sorry, Salty Simulation mod for the 747-800 in-flight simulator. And I think it's actually rather good. So there you go. I'll see you again soon.